List indexing and slicing is very similar to what we saw in the strings section. Remember that indexing in Python is zero based. This means that the first element in a list is going to begin with 0. If we think of our example from the previous lesson where we had a list called country list, and we had Ireland, USA, Germany, Colombia, Japan and Ghana as a list of strings. Ireland is the first object, it is a string object, and this is at index 0. USA at 1, Germany at 2, Colombia at 3, and so on. It is important to note that the last index number for a list is the length of the list minus 1. We can also access the list in reverse order, and we can do this by using negative indexes. Minus 1 accesses the last element of a list. Minus 2 the second last, minus 3 the third last, and so on. The lowest negative index is the negative of the length of the list. So here we can see we have 6 elements and minus 6 is the lowest index number. Let's head over to PyScripter for a further look with examples. Let's recreate our country list from the previous lesson and set this to equal Ireland, USA, Germany, Colombia, Japan and Ghana. Hit enter. Ireland is the first element in that list. It is a string object and we can access that using index 0. We use our country list variable followed by square brackets and we place 0 inside, and we hit enter. We can see that Ireland was returned. We can also access Germany and the last element in our list, Ghana, which is at index 5. We can also use negative indexing. So to access Ghana, we can also put in minus 1. This will return the last element, which is Ghana. Say minus 2, which will be Japan. And minus 6, which will bring us all the way back to Ireland, the first element in the list. We can use minus 6 here because there are 6 elements in the list, and the lowest index we can use is the negative of the length of the list. You can also assign an element of a list to a variable. Here I'll type in Ireland. I can set that equal to our country list at index 0. Now when I print Ireland variable to screen, we get Ireland. We have extracted that string object from our list and assigned it to a variable. Let's take a look at getting a subset of a list via slicing. We'll call our country list variable, after which we will add the square brackets. Subsetting a list is the same as that we saw with strings. We're going to put in a start index, a colon, followed by an end index. It is important to note that the element at the end index is not included in the subset returned. For example, let's start at index 1, which is USA, and we'll set our end to index 4, which is Japan. So you might expect USA, Germany and Colombia and Japan to be extracted, but watch what happens. We get USA, Germany and Colombia. Japan was not included even though it is at index 4. If we don't supply in any start or end index, we get the full list. We can also omit the start and just put in an end. Python will default the start to be index 0. And we can also omit the end and supply in the start. Python will default to the end index plus 1. We can see that we get from index 2, which is Germany, to the end of our list. We can add an extra colon into our square brackets. Now we'd have start, end, and step. I'm going to clear this line of code and create a number list. And just supply in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now we'll add in the 10. Hit enter. We'll call our num list variable, followed by our square brackets. We'll put in our first colon. We're going to go from the start right to the end of this list. And we're going to step over every second element in our list. I'll hit enter. And you can see we returned 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9. So the odd numbers in our list were returned. While it was the odd numbers that was returned, it was the even numbered indexes that were returned, including 0. So we can see 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. I encourage you to create some lists and play around with the indexes, slicing and stepping. Now what happens if you enter an index greater than the length of the list minus 1? Well, let's take a look. We have the built-in function called len, which gets the length of an object, such as the length of a string. Here we're going to get the length of a list. So we'll add in our numList variable and hit enter. And we can see that it has a length of 10. There are 10 elements in that list. Let's call our numList variable, followed by our square brackets. Let's put in the length of our numList. So we know this length of numList equals 10. So 10 is being placed in here. But we know that indexing is 0 based. So the indexes for our numList should run from 0 to 9. When I hit enter, we get an index error, list index out of range. We could use length of numList minus 1 to access the last element. And we can see we get 10. In this video, we took a further step with our list learnings. We saw how we can access an individual element of a list by using an index. In Python, indexing begins at 0. This means that an index of 0 represents the first element of a list. The second element would be at index 1, the third at index 2, and so on. We can also use negative indexing to access elements of a list starting from the end of the list itself. Minus 1 accesses the last element, minus 2 the second last, minus 3 the third last, and so on. With forward indexing, the maximum index can be the length of the list minus 1. For reverse indexing, the lowest index can be the negative of the length of the list. We also saw how we could use slicing to return a subset of a list, followed by stepping to also return a subset of a list.